So this is Samsung's Z Fold 4 and I've been using it for the past month now, and I wanted to give you guys my full review and tell you why I absolutely love this phone. I used the Z Fold 3, the Fold's last generation, and that was a great experience as well, but this has added some small refinements that in all have added up and really made this phone a great phone. So let me tell you why. As far as the design, you are going to be getting an aluminum flat frame that's glossy. On the back, it's a matte back with Gorilla Glass Vitis Plus. This is specifically the gray-green colorway. Personally, I'm a fan of the design. It's pretty much exactly the same as last year, except for those small little differences. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know, it looks pretty nice and it feels pretty nice in the hand as well. Personally, I always use a case just because it adds a little bit of grippiness, because it can be a little bit slippery in my opinion. The phone itself is like 263 grams, I believe, so it is a pretty heavy boy compared to other devices, but over time you definitely get used to it. And with adding a case, it definitely adds a little bit of bulkiness and a little bit of weight too, but again, you definitely get used to it. The hinge itself is also a bit slimmed down now. You can't really notice it unless you're comparing it. And the way the hinge works, still very clean, very nice. You can fold it and flex it at any angle, and when you go to open it and close it now, I do feel a bit of a snappy feeling. So when you're closing it, it like snaps and closed, and when you're opening it, it snaps open. Not like aggressively, but you can feel a little bit of a snap. I don't know if it's just me, but I do feel that. The phone itself is also water resistant, so it's IPX8 rated, not dust resistant yet, which sucks. So if you're around dust, definitely be careful. The power button also has a fingerprint sensor still embedded into it, which is fast, reliable, pretty quick, and easy to use. It can be set on to always be on at all times, so all you gotta do is just lay your finger on it and it turns on. It is a little bit annoying though, just because it might accidentally cause it to trigger when you're not trying to unlock the device, so just keep that in mind. You can also use the fingerprint sensor as a gesture pad, so by swiping down, you can set it up so that it brings down the notification panel. Pretty useful, but again, it can accidentally be triggered. You also have facial recognition, whether it be on the outer cover screen camera or on the inner display camera. Both of them work pretty well, fast, reliable, maybe not as secure as something like Face ID, but still pretty useful nonetheless. The speakers are also pretty decent on here. They get pretty loud, but just keep in mind that if you're using it at a certain way or a certain angle, you might accidentally block the sides when you're using the device. But overall, they sound pretty good in my opinion. Probably not the best speaker system there is out there, but overall, they get the job done. As far as the performance, you're going to be getting a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 with 12 GB of RAM and running Android 12L with One UI 4.1.1. So what does that all mean? Honestly, great performance, great experience in my opinion. So whatever you do on this device, you should be able to handle it plus more easily. So all your daily activities, such as browsing one app at a time, whether it be social media, browsing the internet, checking emails and stuff like that, texting, calling, all that has been great on this device. I've had like no issue with that. And again, you can do more, you can multitask, which I'll go into more depth in a little bit, play games on here and do all other sorts of stuff. Again, all would be running just fine on the Z Fold 4 here. I did experience ever so slightly once in a while some delays or choppiness in the animations. That's more of a One UI thing though, because One UI, I'm pretty sure, is well known to be a little bit choppy when it comes to the animations. It is still relatively smooth overall, but occasionally you'll experience some delays. So for example, where you notice it always, at least all the time for me, is when I'm opening up my multitasking pairs. It has a very slow and not so nice animation to the point that it makes it look like it's lagging a lot. But besides that, experience is still great. I still think it's a very well performing phone here. Where it is a little bit different compared to all other phones is definitely going to be the experience, because you have an outer display and then you also have an inner display. So let's talk about that. So with the outer display, you do have a 6.2-inch 120Hz 1440p dynamic AMOLED display. It is going to be a more narrow and slightly shorter aspect ratio than other devices, so it might be a little bit awkward at first when you're using it, but over time you definitely get used to it. So for example, texting can be a little bit cramped on here, and then also browsing some sort of content can cut off some things on the sides, or if you're watching a video, you'll have some pretty annoying black bars on the sides, and when you pinch the zoom, you'll lose a little bit of content. So not the best experience, but it's still a doable experience in my opinion. And the display itself is very sharp, bright, colorful. It's a Samsung display, so you're going to be getting a very good display here for watching content if you decide to do that. Personally, me, as far as how I use the outer display, I use it all the time. So I use it like if it was my normal phone. So I'll use one app at a time, easily browsing social media, checking emails, texting, even though it is a little bit cramped. changing music, whatever I'm doing can definitely be done, and I do it all the time. And I start to do a little bit more on here, such as being able to play games. When I don't want to use the inner display, I'll just use the outer display and play a game here and there. I also will start to multitask a little bit. Now, I do just limit it to just picture in picture most of the time, so I'll watch a video and then I'll also browse another app such as Reddit. Sometimes, rarely though, I'll split the screen because it is a pretty small screen and it's kind of dumb to use the outer display when you have that inner display. So speaking of that inner display, on the inside, you're going to be getting a 7.6-inch, 120 Hz, 1440p-ish AMOLED display. So it is a flex display, so it is a little bit different compared to the outer display as far as how it feels. It does feel ever so slightly a tad bit plasticier. It might be the screen protector that's actually being used, but you can tell a little bit of a difference, but it still feels pretty good. So it does feel a little bit sticky at times, and when you're going over the crease, you barely feel it, but again, you can feel it, so you might be annoyed by that. And as far as looking at the crease, you can only really see it at an angle. If you're looking at it straight on, you won't notice it. Same thing with the under display camera. If you're looking for it, of course you're going to see it, but if you're just doing your thing, you're not going to notice that at all. They definitely did a better job this time, adding a little bit more pixels, so it definitely hides itself a bit better. And this inner display also picks up a decent amount of lint, so you'll definitely find yourself cleaning this display a lot more, especially since you want to be careful with this display. You don't want to close it with something being caught inside of it. The edges of the screen protector also pick up a decent amount of lint, so it can get a little bit nasty looking after some time, but just make sure you're cleaning it every once in a while to make sure it looks nice, but also keeping it safe. So because it's a Samsung display, again, you're going to be getting a very colorful, bright and vivid display. It looks sharp. It looks really good if you're watching a bunch of content. But again, depending on what app you're using, it may be cut off because some of the apps aren't optimized or are just oversized versions of their mobile apps running on the Z Fold 4. So for example, if you're using, say, a social media app, there's some apps that cut off some content on the top and even on the sides. Or if you're watching a video, you might get some black bars depending on the aspect ratio of the video. So it can be a little bit unimmersive, but it's still pretty immersive in my opinion. But most apps, like I said, should run just fine on here. So whatever apps you're using, you'll be fine. And you can change the aspect ratio if you really wanted to. So if you're not a fan of how the app is looking with the full screen mode, go into your display settings and change the aspect ratio of that specific app, and boom, you have either a 16:9 aspect ratio or a 4:3 aspect ratio, whichever ratio works or feels and looks better to you. Some of my favorite things to do full screen is either watching content, even though yeah, you get some black bars, it's still kind of immersive. Just using your kickstand, prop it up, boom, you get a slightly bigger display than your average phone display. Playing games is another fun thing I like to do on here. I mentioned this before in my other videos that this feels like a DS. Literally, you unfold it and boom, you have a pretty big screen to play your games on here. The games run great on here. As I've already mentioned, the performance is really good. So the experience is improved because you have a big display here. And the number one thing and my favorite thing to do on the Z Fold 4 is multitasking. There are a ton of ways to multitask on the Z Fold 4 and to start multitasking because of One UI has a ton of features. So number one being the new taskbar. So this opens up by default when you open up one app in full screen mode. A little taskbar shows up so you can drag and drop some of those apps right into multitasking, or you can open up your app drawer and drag and drop a different app if you wanted to. You also have the ability to hide the taskbar if you don't want it when you're using an app in full screen mode. So just hold down near the taskbar in one of the clear spaces and then hold it again to bring it back up. The edge bar also works pretty similarly to the taskbar. This was the older version, I want to say, of the taskbar. So basically, you slide it from the side and boom, you have some other apps pre-saved and you can just drag and drop as you please. You can also open up the app drawer and you can also save some multitasking presets or pairs or trios, whatever you want to do. So just by saving them either on the taskbar, on your home screen, or on the edge bar, just click on those and boom, you can start multitasking with your favorite pairs. You also have the ability to swipe from the side when you're in full screen mode. So use two fingers, swipe from the side, and boom, it opens up a little app drawer so you can start picking up another app and start multitasking right away. But as far as the limits of how far you can multitask, you can have up to 3 apps and shuffle them around however you please. Personally, I only use 2 apps, whether it be 2 apps in portrait mode or I'll use 2 apps in landscape mode, so 1 app on the top and 1 app at the bottom. Usually that means I'm playing a video and playing a game, which is another great experience to go about that. You can also drag and drop windows, so you can drop up to 5 different windows if you want to do that. It's like a desktop mode or desktop experience. Personally, I don't do that, but it's up to you to decide if you want to use that. And then you also have picture-in-picture with YouTube, which basically like the front cover screen. You watch a video with YouTube, and then you just browse another app in full screen mode, or just use one of the other multitasking features and also use picture-in-picture. So there's a lot of different ways you can multitask on here, a lot of options. It can be overwhelming, I won't lie, but it's a lot of fun once you get used to it and learn how to use the multitasking mode. Just keep in mind though that some apps may not function properly when you're in multitasking mode or in multi-window mode. You can't go into the settings in your labs and toggle off a feature that basically forces all apps to go into multi-window mode or allow them to go into multi-window mode. So if you don't want some apps that may not function properly, you can turn it off. But personally, I just leave that on just because I want to be able to multitask with any app that I want to. Lastly, you have flex mode, which basically allows you to use your phone as its own kickstand just by folding it up, prop it up, and boom, you're watching content on one half and then browsing settings or looking at other stuff on the bottom half. You can have it set up so that you can use the bottom half as a touchpad. So if you're browsing a non-streaming app such as the internet or something like that, you can make it look like its own computer. I think it's kind of a little bit unresponsive as far as the touchpad. It's more responsive if you're just using your fingers. You can also use flex mode on the outer display. So basically just prop it up ever so slightly at an angle so you can watch the content or whatever you're doing on the outer display. But just be careful because if you open it up a little too much, it'll automatically trigger the inner display. You also have the ability to use the S Pen on the inner display. Personally, I don't use it just because you have to use a specific Z Fold S Pen. I don't like to carry it around even though my case has the ability to do so. I just think it's adding an extra bit of bulkiness that I won't take advantage of. I don't like that the outer display doesn't use an S Pen because I'm so used to being able to use my tablet S Pen on the S22 Ultra screen. So I would have loved to be able to use my tablet S Pen on the outer display. But because this is a Samsung device and it has One UI, you have all those extra features such as Samsung Dex, you have link to Windows, you have quick share and nearby share. You can text and call on other devices such as other Samsung tablets. You can also have the clipboard be shared and then also carry on in notes and stuff like that. There's a lot of different stuff you can do with building like a Samsung ecosystem. Personally, I don't like to get too kiddo with that because I don't want to get stuck in one ecosystem since I like to move around, or I'm starting to move around a lot. So I don't like to drill myself into one place, but you have those abilities if you wanted to with the whole Samsung ecosystem. As far as software support, you will be getting 4 years of major OS updates and then 5 years of security updates. So you'll definitely have a long life of OS updates when it comes to the Z Fold 4. Now, as far as the cameras, I'm not a heavy camera user and I get bored talking about cameras, honestly. So the front camera, it looks good. I think it looks pretty decent in pretty good lighting conditions. When you hit low light situations, it definitely suffers a bit. But besides that, overall it looks pretty good. So my face looks pretty sharp and pretty, I would say, kind of color accurate. I wouldn't say it's the most color accurate camera I've seen, but it does look pretty good overall. Same thing with video. It looks very similar to when you're taking photos. It looks pretty sharp, decent color, and again, when you're in a low light situation, it does seem to suffer a little bit, but it's still more than doable. It records 4K, so it's a pretty decent front camera when it comes to photos and videos. But because it's a folding phone, you do have the ability to use the back camera to take selfies. So if you're taking photos, it definitely improves them over the front camera just because it adds a little bit more sharpness, better color. Also adds a better natural depth of field or bokeh effect, whatever you want to call it, because it looks pretty good. Same thing with video. It definitely improves it quite a bit. Again, adding a little bit of extra bokeh effect there, natural bokeh effect, adding some sharpness, improving the color. So you can definitely use the back cameras for that if you really wanted to. As far as using the back cameras though, overall they're going to be very good in my opinion. You're going to be getting an ultra wide, a main, and a telephoto. They are a little bit improved over last year, so there should be a bit of an improvement from the Z Fold 3. It's going to have that typical Samsung look, so it's going to be a little bit saturated with some poppy colors, so it's not going to be the most natural looking. But the ultra wide and the telephoto, in my opinion, do suffer a little bit when it comes to low lighting conditions. So if you're in a dark environment, then the ultra wide and the telephoto do suffer a little bit. But overall, honestly, you shouldn't be disappointed with this camera system. I would consider it like a mid to flagship type of camera. It's not going to be the greatest that is out there in the competition, but also isn't the worst. So it definitely covers all those basics and doesn't go above and beyond. And as far as the zooming capabilities, it does have the ability to go up to 30x, but personally, I think it doesn't look that great when you're zooming in that far. It's definitely usable, but it's not the greatest quality. So I would probably just stay around 10x at the max, but you do have the ability to go further if you wanted to. Same thing with videos. It's going to look pretty good overall. I shoot my videos in 4K 30. You have the ability to go up to 8K if you wanted to, but as far as like the way it looks, similar to photos, it's going to look a little bit extra poppy and colorful because it's Samsung. It adds some extra color to it. So it's going to be an overall good system. But again, the ultra wide and the telephoto do just lack a little bit of sharpness compared to the main camera. but overall it's still pretty good. And I also did notice that when you're walking, you will notice a little bit of shakeage in the footage, like every step you take, very subtle, slight shakeage. So it could be that the stabilization isn't the greatest on here, but it's not that bad, only if you really look for it. And in low light conditions, ultra wide and telephoto also take a hit, but the main stays relatively okay when in low light conditions. And the max capability of zooming in video is 12x, so it's not the greatest quality, but at least it's a little bit improved from last year's, which was just 10x. And there's the under display camera, which personally I don't use, but it's there if you want to use it. And then lastly, for cameras, Snapchat, I just want to mention it one last final time. The quality is definitely a little bit better because it uses the actual lenses from the phone, so the ultra wide and the wide and the telephoto can all be used naturally or natively, I should say, but it doesn't make it much better because of the aspect ratio still. I'm still annoyed by that because the aspect ratio is long and narrow, but that's just a small niche complaint. Overall, the camera system is really good. I don't think you would be disappointed if you go with the Z Fold 4 and not particularly care about cameras, but if you do care about cameras, then you might want to go with a different device. As far as the battery life, this is where I saw the most improvement over last year, thanks to that Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, I'm pretty sure. So I see myself getting all day with this battery life. So whether it be charging once in a 24-hour cycle, or I'm plugging at 6 a.m. and then using it all day and having to plug in only at like 10:30 p.m. so it lasts me all day. Sometimes I'll end with like 10 or 15 or even 20% battery life left. That's awesome. I think that's really good battery life for me. I get around like maybe 3 to 5 hours of screen on time, which may not be that much compared to some other people. So of course your mileage may vary here, but for me, battery life has been great on here. As far as the charging speeds, you do have 25 watts of fast charging, which takes about an hour and 20 minutes. So there's definitely room for improvement there. You also have wireless charging and reverse wireless charging. So overall, it's been a pretty good improvement from last year that I think battery life is pretty good now. But overall, I absolutely love the Z Fold 4. So all those small refinements that they made from the Z Fold 3, yes, they're small, but they add up to the point that they make the Z Fold 4 a much better of an experience in my opinion. But I still stand by the fact that if you have a Z Fold 3, I definitely would wait just because it costs a lot to upgrade, at least for me it was. So unless you have a lot of money or it only costs you a couple $100s to upgrade, then at that point, yeah, you should. But if you have a Z Fold 2 or a Z Fold 1, or if you're new to foldables and thinking about getting a foldable, definitely get the Z Fold 4 because this is probably the best experience you'll get out there. But otherwise, I'm sticking with the Z Fold 4 for right now. I think it's going to be a great daily device for me. So that's been it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace.